All right, Ms. Christensen, thank you so much for joining me today for this very important conversation. I want to thank
Christianian, actually.
Christianian.
Yes, Christianian.
Thank you so much for that correction.
Okay.
So I want to talk to you today about your activism in the Armenian genocide recognition in the United States space. And so I want to go ahead and get started. If you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you've done to advance Armenian genocide recognition in the United States for us.
Okay. Well, I began back in Massachusetts, where I was raised. I went to Brandeis University, and I've grown up hearing the stories of my grandparents, both sides, going through this harrowing experience, losing their entire families on one side, and most family members on my mother's side, and just the typical horrific stories that I think every Armenian has grown up with, and the injustice of it all, and the denial of their experience. And so there was a burningness in my being to be sure that the story was told. And I went to Brandeis University, which is a largely Jewish university, a big Jewish population, student body. And every year they would have the Holocaust Awareness Week. And it was my senior year. And I had experienced this Holocaust Awareness Week for 3 years. And I was like, why do they not talk about any other genocides that have happened, especially the Armenian genocide, the first genocide of the 20th century. And so I went to the Holocaust Awareness committee or group, whatever organization, and I asked to be able to put a presentation together on the Armenian genocide. And they allowed it. They said, yes, certainly. They were actually quite open to it. And so I went about my business, and I had the posters of the day with the New York Times headlines. I don't know if you've probably seen these posters with the marches and the woman that's tattooed and all. And I had those posters. I put them up. I asked my priest, Der Daja Davidian, at the time, to come and speak, and he agreed. And I put posters all over the campus, and I was expecting a pretty sizable crowd. And about an hour before he was scheduled to speak, I found out that that Justin McCarthy had been allowed to put on a simultaneous presentation on campus. I was floored. I was absolutely shocked that they would have this renowned genocide denier speaking at the same time as the first Armenian genocide awareness program on campus. And I was pretty devastated. So we went ahead and did our presentation. It did usurp our program in certain ways. We didn't have a great turnout. Anyway, fast forward several years later, and I married into an Armenian Lebanese family who had settled in Colorado. And my in-laws had been founding members of the sole Armenian organization in the state, Armenians of Colorado. It's a nonprofit cultural organization. So I pretty much immediately got sort of brought in to the family, not organization, but family mission of, creating an Armenian organization and strengthening it. So I started volunteering, and then I became president in 2000. And up to that point, just as a backdrop, they had done some remarkable work, this organization, starting in 1988, I think it was. Oh, 81. I should know the dates. I don't have that on top of my head. But they had established an Armenian garden on the state capitol grounds with a plaque commemorating the genocide and an evergreen tree that was planted. And it's become huge at this point. But I think it is the only Armenian genocide memorial on a state capitol grounds. So up to that point, they had always secured gubernatorial proclamations commemorating the genocide. And in 2000, we were tasked with growing the organization, wanting to get membership increased, making Colorado known as a hotspot for Armenians who were coming into the country. And anyway, so we decided, along with the grassroots efforts that were happening at the time, to try to get a state resolution in place rather than just gubernatorial. We wanted the state legislators to pass a resolution. And so the community was a little hesitant to take that next step. They were afraid that it would bring too much attention to the Armenian memorial that was already in place, and perhaps the Colorado community would learn about it and start protesting. But we decided, Simon Marakian, which I think you interviewed, and he and another strong advocate, Ken Alikian, he's since passed, and several other community members and board members said, you know what, we're going to go for it. So we drafted a very strongly worded resolution, and we started lobbying, quote unquote, certain state legislators. We had Stephanie Takis, a Greek of Greek heritage. She was a state senator at the time, so she sponsored it on the Senate side, and then we had another representative sponsor it on the House side, and so we had it unanimously passed, and it was a big deal. The community was just really happy about it. I think at that time, this is like 25 years ago almost. I think we had Dr. Richard Hovanessian come out for it, who had been there when we had gotten the plaque in place in the first place. So anyway, so we had the resolution passed unanimously in both houses. And then we also sent it off to the government of Armenia. We sent it to the congressional caucus for Colorado and to the president. And we started this movement of grassroots efforts built on those resolutions. Every year we strengthened the wording. I mean, it got pretty strong and graphic and really called out the current Turkish government for its denialist practices, and we got it passed every year. And then for the centennial, we formed a centennial Armenian Genocide Commemoration Committee with a very aggressive agenda, and we got in place the Khachkar on the state capitol. I think Simon probably talked about it. He was instrumental in getting that in place. I was less involved at that point. I wasn't on the board. I was just working on the committee. And at that time, I had 4 kids. In 2000, I was ready to give birth to my middle child. And when I was on the board, and by the 2015, I had all 4 kids on the committee working with, and they came up with the slogan for the T-shirt and all this. It was great, thrive. I think the slogan for the T-shirt was survive, revive, and thrive. That was the slogan that they wanted to come up with. And so we had those on the T-shirts. And We got the Khashgat in place. We expanded the Armenian Garden. It's a beautiful corner, southeast corner of the state capital. It's very serene, and it's a lovely spot. And we have our gatherings there every April. And those resolutions continue. And so we started to build, as I was saying, build on that momentum to meet with the congressional caucuses of Colorado and really push for them to step up and do the right thing and pass a Armenian genocide recognition at the federal level. So yeah, and we just kept work one foot in front of the other, kept working to try to get things in place for the recognition and to build the community here and cohesive community.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's taken a lot of effort on your guys' part to strategize and make sure you were talking to the right people. I want to touch a little bit about the resistance, because it sounds like some of that resistance against recognition spawned some of your efforts. Where do you think that resistance was coming from, and why do you think there was such an avoidance to recognize the Armenian genocide? It took so long for the United States nationally to come around. In your work at the local level, at the state level, why do you think there was such resistance? And I know that gets reflected on a national level too, but I just want to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, I think the Turkish government has done an incredible job of, first and foremost, indoctrinating their population with lies, a revised history that serves their purpose. They're also strategically in a place on the global stage where they've inserted themselves in as negotiators, as valuable partners to bring certain initiatives forward, of peace or here or there. They have their air bases that the U.S. is using. They have created ways to have leverage over governments. And then, of course, when any government, flies in their face and threatens recognition or had threatened recognition in the past, they will pull, their ambassadors or their diplomatic relations, or they'll have like a hissy fit, basically, and until things settle down. And they've orchestrated this in a way with the United States. It seems the Turkish government is behind any of these Turkish American organizations, funding them. So we started to get some pushback as we were getting more and more exposure with the resolutions every year from this organization called the Mosaic organization, I think it's called. And it's a Turkish government-funded cultural organization. And they started to approach the state legislators who are, with these trips to Turkey during the recess. So they would take legislators over to Turkey, wine and dine them, give them the tour, give them the revised history, and then send them on back. And these legislators had, Turkey's a beautiful country. It's exotic. They've got, a lot to offer. And these American state legislators their eyes were, so they started to do the begging of the Mosaic group and started to speak out against the resolution. So we started not to have unanimously passed resolutions. We still passed them, but they weren't unanimous. And there was, I think, it's kind of hard to remember. I think there was one year that we were not able to get it put through. You know, they didn't bring it up because they didn't think that it was going to pass. I don't remember what the circumstances were. Simon's so much more adept at remembering the real details on this. But yeah, so we did start to get some pushback from the Mosaic group. And there's always, I had another incident, as you know, during my time on Armenians of Colorado, we organized, we collaborated with a Jewish museum called the Meisel Museum. And it's really odd how history repeats itself, because here I am, you know, 25 years later from Brandeis, and I'm working with this Jewish museum. I'm collaborating with another organization. We're collaborating with Colorado Genocide Awareness, and they changed their name recently, Colorado Coalition for Genocide Awareness and Action, who was founded by another Jewish woman activist, Roz Duman. She's been a great ally for us as well. And so she kind of brought us in with the Meisel Museum to do this, to be part of this whole genocide presentation. They had built this incredible presentation. It was now a traveling presentation, and it highlighted all of the genocides through the ages, starting with the American Indians, frankly, and going right through. And so we were going to have Taner Akçam come and speak as our keynote for this this event, and then,
just to ask very quickly about him, he is a scholar at UCLA, is that correct?
You know, I should know all of that. He's a Turkish scholar, and he wrote a book, which I have. Oh goodness. And he wrote the counter argument against the Turkish government. Lies that and proved that it was an organized state-sponsored genocide. And so he was going to speak about that at the Meisel Museum. And what happened was, on the board of the Meisel Museum was a Turkish American. And he wanted to not have it a keynote speak with Taner Akçam, but a panel discussion. And his scholar was Justin McCarthy. So the same one, right? I'm like, oh my God, how is this happening? So Roz was infuriated. She's pushing back. I mean, it was like, this is not a debate. This is not a panel discussion. This is a fact of history, that it was a genocide, and we don't need to look at both sides of the argument. There is no both sides of the argument, just like there isn't with the Holocaust. And so we did win that argument, and he was not allowed to speak at the Meisel Museum, but good enough. And this guy was being brought in by the Mosaic Foundation, the Turkish funded organization in Colorado. And so he wound up speaking for 2 days, 2 events, back to back, at the University of Denver. And so the same time and day that Taner Akçam was going to speak at Meisel Museum, Justin McCarthy spoke. And then a group of us went the next day when he was also speaking. And I wanted to listen to this guy's arguments and justifications and rationalizations on behalf of the Turkish government. And it was so hollow and so fabricated. And we started asking questions. Of course, it was all Turkish Americans that were there. There were really hardly any new ears to the subject. So we started asking questions and poking all kinds of holes in his arguments. And it was a moment of closure for me, coming from Brandeis, sabotaging my.
I mean, it's the meeting of two people at different points on the same issue.
Yeah,
That must have been quite a surreal experience
it was.
to meet
It was.
again.
Yeah,
Um,
we went out and celebrated.
oh, there you go. I want to go back to the success of your work. Um, what do you think were the most effective strategies as you guys were advocating? And it sounds like it was a group effort. Um, in
Definitely.
the advocacy process, what do you think were the most effective strategies that were able to really catapult the issue forward, with, legislatures at the local level, or, even amongst, when you guys would hold events, right? Like, in talking to people about this issue, what do you think worked the best for you guys?
So personal outreach to allies, people who may have experienced similar experiences in their histories. Like, for instance, Stephanie Takis, who's of Greek heritage. She was our first sponsor for the resolution. Lois Tautrop. What happened was her son went to Armenia and married an Armenian girl. He was what was he? He went out over there with American Corps or something. It's some voluntary position over there, and fell in love with an Armenian woman and married. And so she had skin in the game. She was our house sponsor for many years until she retired. Um, just collaborating with other organizations, so that it was viewed with allies behind us, and verifying us, and that sort of thing, I think, really is helpful, to not just go it alone and pound on we've been wronged as Armenians. Um, we have been wronged. All of us have been wronged, and here's why. And we back them up, they back us up. That sort of thing has, I think, been effective.
Okay. So the coalition building, it sounds like, is
Exactly.
really the key component here that's worked for you guys.
Yeah.
If I may, I want to turn to that point in 2021 where President Biden releases that statement, officially recognizing the Armenian genocide. First of all, what was that moment like for you? I mean, for somebody who's done so much work on this issue, what was that like for you? What did it mean to you? And then I want to kind of build on that as we continue the conversation.
I think it was somewhat bittersweet. There's a bit of an anger underneath it that it took so damn long. I mean, as an American, you want to know that your government is going to stand on the right side of history and not cave to superficial, self-serving reasons for caving. And I think President Biden, I mean, he's a principled man, but he's also a pragmatic politician. And so I think it just took so long until Turkey, there was like a perfect storm, I think, that Turkey had, they sold some fighter jets or something to Russia. And there were some other things that were happening there, complicity in helping Azerbaijan with the ethnic cleansing of Artsakh. And just all of these things went into a perfect storm, that it was the right time with no real downside for President Biden to recognize the genocide. We were thrilled, finally, but it was also like, why? Why did it take so long?
Yeah, I hear that. It sounds like for you it was, there were American self-interest wasn't as, I guess, prominent in that maybe decision making. If you know, correct me if I'm wrong. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
And so that may have been what led to the shift. Do you think there are other reasons why, you know, in that moment, you know, President Biden may have shifted American policy, or do you think that it was largely because of these other factors that went into play that didn't necessarily serve American interests anymore?
I think it was a combination of both. You know, I think I think the US has always wanted to recognize it, but they've been under such pressure from the Turkish government, and Turkey had the leverage with the air bases and what was happening in Iraq, and, you know, all through the stuff that's through the ages, the years that the Middle East has had these issues, and Turkey has been a touchstone for the U.S. to be able to launch, you know, planes from, and so it's had a strategic importance to the U.S. And maybe there was less importance at that moment in time, and that's when President Biden went ahead and did it.
Thank you. I want to, at this point, turn to the future of it. In regards to Armenian genocide recognition, whether that's the United States or around the world, what are your hopes for the future on this front?
It's pretty bad right now, I'll tell you. In terms of Armenia itself, I mean, it's going through an existential threat with Turkey on one side and Azerbaijan on the other, just squeezing the country. I'm fearful, and the Armenian government is not doing what it needs to ensure that Armenia remains. So it's a very troubling time right now for Armenians worldwide, and for Armenia as a country, and of course all the people that were you know, moved, ethnically cleansed, displaced. It's been horrible in Nagorno-Karabakh, Artsakh. I think what we need to do as Armenians is to get into positions of influence, more so now than ever, in terms of like becoming elected officials, first and foremost, becoming Congress people and senators and president. I mean, let's go, you know, let's get more involved in that, on that side of it, but also on policy making, get involved in the staffs of these elected officials, and have that influence on them. I think that's really what's going to make a difference in how we can get more pro-Armenian policies happening through our government.
I have two last questions that kind of are inspired by your response here. My first question is, do you think that the United States, having recognized the Armenian genocide, may have had an impact on the current state of affairs that Armenia may be going through in terms of Artsakh and the aggression against Armenians? Do you think that that decision that the United States may have impacted that in some way?
Interesting question. You know, I mean, it poked the bear. Is that what you're saying? So Turkey just got up and said, let's just finish the job. Let's go, Azerbaijan, let's do it. And I mean, that's what their plan is. They've stated so. They want to just wipe Armenia out and make it a whole pan-Turkic area. And Russia does not have Armenia's back. Who does Armenia turn to? Iran? Another enemy of the U.S.? I mean, and the U.S. is just gonna, you know, they're not a reliable ally either. It's really sad. You know, you may be onto something with that question, that, you know, if that the traction that the worldwide that the Armenian genocide recognition has at this point. I mean, I don't think there are very few people who would doubt the veracity of that you know, statement that the Armenian genocide actually happened, except for those that are complicit in it.
Right. And so with that, I want to end with, if you, in regards to exerting influence over American foreign policy and the role that Armenian Americans have in the United States, what do you think the next big priority is? What should the ask be? And where should Armenian Americans be directing their attention towards?
I think the big ask is to fortify humanitarian aid for the people of Artsakh and the right of return, and to admonish that what has happened, and to sanction Azerbaijan and Turkey. I mean, there's some really strong actions that should be taking place against Turkey and Azerbaijan. I just don't know if with the oil that Azerbaijan has, and, you know, the influence that Turkey still has on the world stage, I don't know if it will happen. But first and foremost, we need to help the people of Artsakh that have been displaced. Humanitarian aid really needs to happen. That's the big ask, I think, right now. Stabilize it.
Stabilize the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Kim, I want to thank you for your time and your expertise. It's clear that you've done pivotal work for the community. I want to thank you for your time and all of that advocacy, and also sharing your story. This is one that needs to be told, and your expertise, I hope with this and your story, that it inspires other people and the next generation to really step up as you stay into those positions of power, you know, using their voices.
Mm-hmm.
Because ultimately, you know, we are in this country together, and we are here, and we have a say as well. I want to kind of open it up to you on any last thoughts you have that you want to share, and that you think is important to share for those who are watching, and give you that floor.
Well, just to elaborate on that, I mean, Armenians are a well-educated, you know, successful people generally, and we just need to, you know, to go to that next level. Why not Armenians in positions of political power? You know, it's time for us to step up to that. Get elected to the state level, and then up into the Congress and Senate, and start running for president. Time is now. You know, it's the world is open, and I think it's really time to do it. And I think we'll be able to have much more influence to safeguard our motherland in that way.
Here's to that.
Yeah. I appreciate your work. Thank you so much for documenting this, and to get the word out about the activism that's happening.
Of course. Yeah, it's my pleasure. I want to thank you again for your time. I'm going to go ahead and end this, but thank you for your time. And I hope that all of the things that you shared, you know, is kind of that inspiring point for those who are watching, who will take that next step. So thank you.
Awesome.